It was a quiet Saturday morning when she woke up to the sound of rain tapping softly against her window. The world outside looked calm, washed in shades of gray and silver. She sat up in bed, stretched her arms, and took a deep breath. For a moment, she thought about staying under the blanket a little longer. But she had promised herself she wouldn't waste her weekends anymore. Life had felt empty lately, and she wanted to do something that mattered. After losing her job a few months earlier, her days had started blending into one another. There were times when she'd go a whole day without speaking to anyone. Her small apartment was clean and organized, but it felt lifeless, like a place where memories had stopped growing. She had friends, yes, but they were busy with families and work. Most days she simply kept to herself, cooking small meals, reading old books, and trying to convince herself that this was just a passing phase. One evening, while scrolling through her phone, she came across a post from a local animal shelter. They were asking for volunteers, people to help clean, walk dogs, and give them attention. The pictures caught her eye immediately. There were so many faces staring back at her through those photos. Dogs of all sizes, some scared, some excited, and some simply tired of waiting. She had always loved animals, especially dogs. When she was a child, she had one she loved more than anything in the world. Thinking of that memory still made her heart tighten, even after so many years. She decided that maybe volunteering could be good for her. Maybe it would bring a bit of warmth back into her life. That's how she found herself at the shelter the following weekend, standing near the entrance, slightly nervous but smiling. The air smelled of wet fur and disinfectant. Inside, she could hear the sound of barking. Dozens of dogs in cages, each one hoping someone would stop in front of them. A woman with kind eyes and a cheerful tone welcomed her and handed her a volunteer badge. "You can start by helping with the morning walks," the woman said. "The dogs love getting out after being inside all night." She nodded and followed her down a narrow hallway lined with kennels. The dogs wagged their tails, some jumping against the metal gates, others sitting quietly, observing her with cautious eyes. Each kennel had a small tag with a name, age, and a short description. Her heart melted at the sight of them. She didn't know which one to choose first. She picked a small brown dog named Toby. He was shy, hiding at the back of his kennel. It took her a few minutes of gentle coaxing before he came close enough for her to clip the leash onto his collar. Once outside, though, Toby seemed to come alive. His tail wagged furiously as he sniffed around, running in small circles. Watching him made her smile. A real smile, one that reached her eyes. Over the next few weeks, volunteering at the shelter became part of her routine. She would wake up early every Saturday and Sunday, pack a sandwich for lunch, and walk to the shelter. The dogs had started recognizing her scent and voice. Every time she entered, there would be a small chorus of barks, her own kind of welcome. There was something peaceful about it all. Cleaning cages, refilling water bowls, brushing tangled fur. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a strange kind of comfort. She liked the feeling of being needed, but even as she settled into this new rhythm, there were still nights when she couldn't sleep. Sometimes she'd sit on her couch with a cup of tea, staring at the framed photo on her shelf. A picture of her, about 8 years old, holding a small golden puppy. The puppy's ears were floppy, its fur shiny and soft. She could still remember how it felt in her arms, warm and wiggly. She had named him Buddy. Buddy had come into her life when she was just a kid. Her father had brought him home one rainy afternoon wrapped in a towel. She remembered the joy she felt, how she had squealed and hugged her father tightly. From that day on, Buddy had been her best friend. They went everywhere together. Long walks, trips to the park, even sleeping side by side at night. He was there for her when she was happy, and when she cried, he would quietly rest his head on her lap as if to say, "I'm here." But one summer, when she was around 12, Buddy ran off. It had happened so fast. Someone had left the gate open, and he had chased after something down the street. They searched for days. Posters, calls, walking through every street, asking every neighbor. But Buddy never came back. It had been one of the hardest losses of her childhood. Her parents tried to comfort her, telling her that maybe someone kind had taken him in. But deep down, she had always felt guilty, as if she had failed him somehow. Over time, the pain dulled, but the memory never faded completely. Now, years later, standing in an animal shelter surrounded by lonely dogs, she felt that old ache returning. She would sometimes pause and stare into a dog's eyes. almost expecting to recognize something familiar. The same softness, the same look Buddy used to give her. But of course she would remind herself that was impossible. One morning, after several weeks of volunteering, she arrived early. The rain had just stopped and the ground outside was wet, reflecting the pale morning sky. As she entered the shelter, she noticed a new arrival. The staff were filling out paperwork, and near them sat an old golden retriever. His fur was matted, his eyes cloudy with age, and his tail wagged weakly when anyone came close. He was found wandering near the highway, one of the staff members said. No collar, no microchip. Poor guy's been through a lot. Something about him made her pause. There was a strange pull in her chest, like a memory trying to surface. She walked closer and knelt in front of him. The dog lifted his head slightly, and for a second, their eyes met. Her breath caught. The dog's face was older, worn, but there was something familiar about it, the shape of his muzzle, the faint white line near his nose. Her heart began to race. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. She shook her head and smiled faintly, brushing away the thought. "Hey there, old boy," she whispered. "You've got kind eyes." The dog blinked slowly, then moved his head forward until it rested gently against her knee. That small gesture sent a wave of warmth through her chest, followed by something she couldn't name. Sadness, hope, disbelief, all mixed together. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She told herself it was silly. The world was full of dogs that looked similar. Buddy would be gone by now. Or if he had survived, he would have belonged to someone else for years. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling. The next morning, she went back earlier than usual. She brought a few treats in her pocket and went straight to the old retriever's kennel. He was lying down but lifted his head when he saw her. His tail wagged slowly, tired but happy. "Hey," she said softly. "You remember me?" She reached through the bars and let him sniff her hand. Then very gently he licked her fingers. It was such a small thing, but her eyes filled with tears. She spent hours with him that day, brushing his fur, cleaning his paws, and whispering small things like, "You're safe now," and "You're such a good boy." The other volunteers teased her lightly, saying she had found her favorite already. She laughed it off, but deep down, something inside her was stirring, a whisper of something long buried. Over the next few days, she started noticing small things, little habits that reminded her of Buddy. The way he tilted his head when she said, "Walk." The way he would nudge her hand twice before sitting down, just like Buddy used to do when he wanted her attention. Even the faint scar on his right ear. It was exactly where Buddy had been injured as a puppy. Every coincidence made her chest tighten a little more. She didn't dare to believe it, yet she couldn't ignore it either. One evening, as she was about to leave, the old retriever did something that stopped her in her tracks. She had picked up her bag and was walking toward the door when she heard a soft whine behind her. She turned around and saw him sitting near the gate, looking straight at her. Then he lifted his paw, just one, and held it out, the same way Buddy used to do when he wanted her to stay. For a moment, everything else faded. The sounds, the people, even the smell of the shelter. All she could see were those tired eyes staring at her, full of something she couldn't explain. Her throat tightened, and her heart felt like it might burst. She didn't say anything. She couldn't, but she knew, deep down, that something extraordinary was about to happen. The next morning she woke up before her alarm. Her mind had been restless all night, circling back to that old retriever and the way he had lifted his paw. It had felt so personal, almost like a memory reaching out from the past. She lay there for a while staring at the ceiling, the thought of him pulling gently at her heart. Finally, she decided she couldn't wait until the weekend. She called the shelter and asked if she could come in that afternoon. The woman on the phone sounded surprised but said, "Of course, come by any time. He'll be happy to see you." When she arrived, the retriever was lying quietly on his blanket. The moment he heard her voice, his head lifted, and his tail thumped slowly against the floor. She smiled, kneeling beside him. "Hey, old boy," she whispered. "Missed me?" He gave a soft whine and pressed his head into her hand. It felt so natural, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Over the next week, she spent more time with him than with anyone else. She would sit beside his kennel, talking softly while brushing his fur. Sometimes she'd tell him stories from her day. Other times she'd just sit in silence. He didn't need words. His presence alone had a way of calming her. The shelter staff began to notice their connection. One afternoon, one of them smiled and said, "He really likes you. You should think about adopting him." Her heart skipped a beat. The idea had already been floating in her mind, but she had pushed it aside. She wasn't sure she was ready for that kind of commitment again. Her life still felt uncertain. She was looking for a new job, trying to rebuild herself. What if she couldn't give him the life he deserved? "I don't know," she said softly. "He's older. He might need more care than I can handle." The staff member smiled kindly. "Sometimes the right ones come back into our lives when we least expect them." Those words lingered in her mind for the rest of the day. That evening, as she was leaving, she stopped by the retriever's kennel one last time. He looked up at her, his eyes gentle and warm. She leaned down, pressed her forehead against his, and whispered, "You feel like someone I used to know." When she got home, she couldn't shake the feeling. Her old photo album sat on the shelf, untouched for years. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled it down and opened it. The first few pages were filled with pictures of her childhood, birthday parties, school trips, family holidays. Then she found it, the picture she'd been thinking about. It was her and Buddy sitting on the front porch. His fur had the same shade of golden brown, his nose the same soft black, and right there, a small scar on his right ear. She looked closer, her fingers trembling slightly. The resemblance was uncanny. Of course, she knew it couldn't be possible. Buddy had disappeared so many years ago. Even if he had survived, dogs didn't usually live that long. But her heart refused to let go of the thought. She stared at the photo for a long time, tracing the outline of his face. Then, without really deciding to, she whispered to the empty room, "What if it's really him?" The next day, she went back to the shelter with a new sense of determination. She asked if she could help with feeding and grooming, just so she could spend more time around the retriever. The staff agreed, happy to have someone so dedicated. She learned that the dog had been found by a passerby near an old rural road outside the city. He had no collar, no tag, nothing to tell who he belonged to. They had taken him to a local vet who guessed he might be around 12 or 13 years old. Old, but still strong enough to live a few more years with proper care. The more she listened, the more her heart pounded. Buddy would be around that age now if he were alive. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about everything. The way he looked at her, the small scar, the habits that matched perfectly. It all felt too specific to be random. She started wondering if there was a way to find out for sure. The next day, she visited the vet who had examined the retriever. She asked carefully, trying not to sound foolish, "Is there any way to trace where he might have come from? Maybe check if he ever had a chip that stopped working?" The vet smiled gently. "Sometimes old microchips stop responding, yes. We could try scanning him again." Her heart leapt. "Can we do it today?" Within the hour, they had the retriever on the table. He sat patiently, tail wagging, while the vet ran the scanner across his neck and shoulders. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then suddenly a small beep echoed in the quiet room. She gasped. The vet's eyebrows rose. "Well, look at that. There's a chip." It was faint but still active enough to read. The vet tapped on his computer and entered the code. After a few seconds, the screen flashed with old registration data. Her breath caught when she saw the name that appeared. Buddy. The room went quiet. The vet turned to her slowly, his eyes wide. "Is that your dog?" Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. She nodded, her hand covering her mouth. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's mine." It felt unreal, like time had folded back on itself, connecting two moments that were never meant to meet again. Buddy turned his head toward her, sensing her emotion, and wagged his tail softly. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I found you," she whispered through tears. "After all these years, I found you." The vet smiled warmly. "Looks like fate had a hand in this one." She stayed at the clinic for a long time, stroking Buddy's fur, trying to absorb everything that had just happened. Her childhood memories came flooding back. The nights she cried for him. The posters she had hung on every wall. The endless hope that he'd come back. Now, here he was, old and tired, but alive, as if he had been waiting all this time to be found again. When she finally drove home that evening, the world outside looked different, brighter somehow. She kept glancing at the passenger seat where Buddy sat quietly, his head resting on a blanket. Every so often he'd look up at her and she'd reach over to scratch his chin. She couldn't stop smiling. At home, she set up a small bed for him in the living room, laid out a bowl of fresh water, and opened a can of dog food. He ate slowly, wagging his tail the whole time. Then when he finished, he walked over and curled up right next to her feet, just like he used to when she was little. She sat there watching him, overwhelmed with emotion. So many questions filled her mind. Where had he been all these years? How had he survived? Who had cared for him? And how had he ended up near that road? But for now, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that he was home. Later that night, she called her parents. When her mother answered, she could barely get the words out. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "You won't believe this. Buddy's alive." There was a long pause on the other end, followed by disbelief, then tears, and finally joy. Her parents came over the next day, and the moment her mother saw Buddy, she cried. Even her father, who rarely showed emotion, knelt down and petted him quietly. "You old rascal," he said softly. "You found your way back." Buddy wagged his tail and licked his hand as if he remembered them all. The days that followed were filled with laughter and warmth. Neighbors came to visit, amazed by the story. People from the shelter couldn't stop talking about it. Some called it a miracle, others said it was destiny. She didn't know what to call it. All she knew was that something extraordinary had brought them together again. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit beside him, watching him sleep. His fur had grayed and his breathing was slow and steady. She would reach out to stroke his head and whisper, "You came back to me." And every time, even in his sleep, his tail would wag. Just a little. It was as if he was saying, "I never really left." The first few weeks after bringing Buddy home felt like a dream. Every morning, she would wake up to the gentle sound of his paws moving across the wooden floor. He would come to her bedside, nudge her hand, and wait patiently until she opened her eyes. The moment she did, his tail would start wagging, slow and steady, as if he were saying, "I'm still here." She had never felt that kind of peace in years. Her days suddenly had meaning again. She would cook breakfast with him sitting near her feet, take him for short walks around the park, and even talk to him like she used to when she was a child. It didn't matter that he couldn't talk back. His eyes always seemed to understand everything. But as time passed, she started to notice small changes. Buddy would get tired faster during walks. He would sometimes stumble a little when climbing stairs or hesitate before getting up from his bed. His food bowl often remained half full. She told herself he was just old, that it was normal for him to slow down. But deep down, a quiet worry began to grow inside her. One evening, as she brushed his fur, she noticed he winced slightly when she touched his side. She froze for a moment, then ran her fingers gently along his ribs. He didn't yelp, but his eyes softened and he turned away. She felt her heart tighten. The next day, she called the vet and scheduled a checkup. At the clinic, Buddy sat patiently beside her, his head resting against her leg. The vet examined him carefully, checking his heart, his breathing, his joints. After a while, the vet sighed and said softly, "He's an old boy now. His body's slowing down. It's not uncommon for dogs his age to have arthritis and a few other issues." Her chest felt heavy. "Is he in pain?" "Not too much right now," the vet said. "But he will need regular checkups and medication to keep him comfortable. You'll also need to make sure he rests more and eats properly." She nodded, her throat tight. "I'll do whatever he needs." For the next few weeks, she followed the vet's advice carefully. She gave Buddy his medicine on time, adjusted his diet, and made sure his walks were gentle and short. He seemed happy still, and slow, yes, but content. He would wag his tail every time she came home, even if he didn't have the energy to get up right away. But taking care of him wasn't easy. Between job applications, house chores, and his medical needs, her days became full. Money started feeling tight, too. His medicines were expensive, and the vet visits added up quickly. There were days when she had to skip things for herself just to make sure Buddy had everything he needed. Some friends tried to talk her out of it. "He's an old dog," one of them said gently. "You've done enough. Maybe it's time to let him go." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Let him go? After all this time? After finding him again? Her voice trembled with anger and heartbreak. "He came back to me. I'm not giving up on him now." That night she sat beside Buddy's bed and whispered, "I don't care how hard it gets. I lost you once. I won't lose you again." Buddy opened his eyes and looked at her with that same soft expression, one that seemed to say he understood. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between them grew even deeper. She had found a part-time job nearby, enough to keep things stable, but she still spent most of her free time with him. On weekends, they would go to the park, where she would sit on a bench while he lay beside her watching people pass by. Sometimes small children would come up to pet him, and he would greet them with gentle patience just as he had done when she was little. One afternoon, a little girl ran up and asked, "What's his name?" She smiled. "Buddy," the girl giggled. "That's a perfect name." She nodded, her heart swelling. "Yeah, he's always been my best buddy." As time went on, though, Buddy's health began to decline more noticeably. His steps grew slower, and sometimes his legs would tremble slightly after standing for too long. There were nights when he wouldn't eat at all, just lay beside her quietly, breathing heavily. Every time that happened, she would sit next to him, her hand resting on his fur, whispering softly until he drifted to sleep. One morning, she woke up and noticed Buddy wasn't beside her bed. Panic shot through her as she got up quickly. She found him in the living room, lying near the window. He looked peaceful but tired and too tired. She knelt beside him, her heart pounding. "Hey, boy," she said gently. "What are you doing here?" He opened his eyes slowly, wagged his tail once, then rested his head back down. She stayed with him for hours that day, not wanting to leave his side. The thought that she could lose him again terrified her. She had only just gotten him back. It felt unfair that life could be so cruel. That evening, she called the vet again, and after a checkup, they said his heart was weakening. "He's reaching that stage," the vet said carefully. "You've given him so much love and comfort. That matters more than anything now." She nodded silently, tears welling in her eyes. On the drive home, she kept one hand on Buddy's back, feeling the slow rhythm of his breathing. At home, she laid a soft blanket near her bed and helped him lie down. She sat beside him, brushing her fingers through his fur. "You don't have to worry about anything anymore," she whispered. "You're home. You're safe." That night, as rain began to fall outside, she found herself remembering everything. The years of missing him, the miracle of finding him again, the laughter, the long walks, and now this quiet, fragile moment. Life had come full circle in a way she never could have imagined. In the following days, Buddy's condition stayed fragile. Some mornings he seemed better, standing up to eat and even wagging his tail when she walked in. Other days he barely moved. She took each moment as it came, learning to be grateful for every small wag, every glance, every breath. Her parents visited often. Her mother would help cook soft food for Buddy, and her father would sit quietly, scratching behind his ears. Everyone could feel it, that his time was nearing. One evening, while watching him sleep, she whispered, "You came back to teach me something, didn't you?" Maybe he had. Maybe Buddy had come back to remind her about love, the kind that never fades no matter how many years pass. The kind that survives loss, distance, and time. It was a strange mix of happiness and pain that filled her heart now. She knew what was coming, but she also knew she wouldn't trade this time for anything. Then one night she woke up to a soft whimper. She turned on the light and saw Buddy trying to stand but struggling. She rushed over, kneeling beside him. "It's okay, boy," she said quickly. "I'm here." He looked at her, his eyes calm and full of trust. She held him gently, her tears falling as she whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." He gave a faint wag of his tail, then slowly rested his head against her hand. She sat with him through the night, talking to him softly, telling him how much she loved him. Outside, the world was quiet. No cars, no wind. Just the sound of rain and her steady voice filling the room. As dawn broke, light began to spill through the window. Buddy's breathing slowed, steady but weaker than before. She held him close, pressing her forehead to his, just like she had done so many years ago when she was a child. And for a brief moment, everything felt still. Time, sound, even the air around them. Just her and him. Then gently, Buddy's breathing stopped. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, holding him, unable to believe it. The warmth of his body faded slowly, leaving behind a stillness that broke her heart in a way she couldn't describe. When the tears finally came, they didn't stop for a long time. She stayed beside him for hours, whispering, "Thank you for finding your way back to me." That morning, as the sun rose and the rain cleared, she looked outside and saw the world washed clean, quiet and bright. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that Buddy was still there, just in a different way now. After Buddy passed, the apartment felt unbearably quiet. The absence of his gentle paws on the floor, the lack of his soft breathing beside her bed, and the silence during morning walks left an emptiness she hadn't expected. She wandered through the rooms as if looking for him, calling his name quietly, even though she knew he wouldn't answer. For the first few days, she couldn't bring herself to clean his bed or put away his bowls. She simply sat beside them, remembering. She remembered the day she had first found him at the shelter, the moment she had scanned his microchip and realized he was Buddy, the years of love and laughter they had shared. All of it came flooding back, along with the pain of knowing he was gone again. Yet amidst the grief, a strange realization began to emerge, one that she hadn't noticed before. Buddy's life had been more than just a series of happy memories or the joy of his return. It had been a lesson. Every moment with him had reminded her of the fragility of life, the importance of patience, and the power of unconditional love. She thought about the nights she had spent holding him when he struggled to breathe, the days she had rearranged her schedule just to be there for him, and the way he had trusted her completely. Even after all the years he had spent alone, she realized that love wasn't about how long someone stayed with you. It was about how fully you gave yourself in the time you had. As she walked through the apartment that morning, she found herself in the corner where Buddy had always slept. She ran her fingers over the soft blanket, now folded neatly. A small tear slid down her cheek, but she felt a warmth in her chest. She whispered softly, "You taught me everything, Buddy, thank you." It wasn't just the loss that weighed on her, though. She started thinking about how miraculous it had been to find him after all these years. The coincidence of him ending up at the shelter, the exact dog she had loved as a child, and it seemed impossible. She kept replaying the moment she had first seen him there, older and worn, but unmistakably Buddy. She realized something that stopped her in her tracks. Life had a way of bringing back what was truly important, often in ways we could never predict. Buddy had returned not because it was easy, but because it was meant to happen, because the connection they shared was too strong to be broken by time or distance. She remembered her mother's words when she first told her the story over the phone. Sometimes things happen for a reason, even if we don't understand at the time. Now, after losing Buddy again, she began to understand those words in a deeper, more profound way. It wasn't just about finding a lost dog. It was about recognizing love, fate, and resilience. It was about the courage to give your heart fully, knowing that life can take it back and yet choosing to love anyway. Buddy's journey had shown her the value of patience and trust, of never giving up hope, and of cherishing every fleeting moment. A few days later, she went back to the shelter, not to adopt another dog, but to volunteer, just like she had before finding Buddy. The familiar smell of wet fur and the chorus of barking greeted her. She smiled through her tears. Every dog there needed care and love, and she could give that now, because of what Buddy had taught her. While brushing a shy little terrier, she noticed a plaque on the wall listing the stories of dogs who had been adopted. One name caught her attention, a golden retriever who had been reunited with his owner after many years. Her breath caught, and she realized it was Buddy's story, already written down as an example of hope. She knelt beside the terrier, gently stroking his ears, and whispered, "You can make a difference too in someone's life." In the quiet moments after volunteering, she often thought back to Buddy's life. She remembered the struggles he had faced, the long years of wandering and uncertainty, and the final days she had spent holding him. It was overwhelming, but it also brought clarity. She understood now that every act of kindness, every moment of love, and every choice to stay present mattered. She began to notice how the smallest things in life carried meaning. A walk in the park became an opportunity to appreciate the beauty of the world. A quiet evening at home became a chance to reflect and connect with the memories of those she had loved and lost. Buddy had shown her that life was fragile, yes, but it was also filled with moments of pure magic, moments that could transform ordinary days into something extraordinary. One evening, sitting on her balcony, she watched the sun set over the city. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the scent of rain on concrete. She closed her eyes and thought of Buddy. She could almost feel him there beside her, his head resting on her lap, his warm eyes looking up at her. A gentle breeze brushed against her face, and she felt a wave of peace wash over her. She realized that Buddy's love hadn't left her. It was still alive in her heart, in her actions, and in the way she looked at the world. his life, his return, and even his passing had shaped her into someone more compassionate, patient, and aware of the beauty in fleeting moments. She remembered the fear she had felt when she first noticed his health declining, the struggle to care for him, to keep him comfortable, to give him every bit of love she could. It had been exhausting, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had discovered a strength in herself that she hadn't known existed. She had learned that love wasn't easy, but it was always worth it. A few weeks later, she received a letter from the shelter. They had compiled the stories of animals and their owners, highlighting the journeys that touched lives. When she opened it, there was a photo of Buddy and a short paragraph about their reunion. She read it slowly, letting each word sink in. Some bonds cannot be broken no matter how many years pass. Some love is so strong that it finds a way back, even through the most unlikely paths. This is the story of Buddy, who returned to his family after years apart, reminding us all of the power of patience, hope, and unconditional love. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were different. Tears of gratitude, not just of sadness. She folded the letter carefully and placed it on her shelf, next to the photo of her and Buddy from her childhood. It was a reminder that life, even when filled with loss, could bring miracles in ways we might never expect. In the weeks that followed, she continued to volunteer, helping dogs that reminded her of Buddy in small ways. Some were shy, some were old, and some had been abandoned. Each time she helped one find comfort or a new home, she felt Buddy's spirit with her, a quiet presence guiding her, teaching her, reminding her that love never truly ends. She also began sharing her story with others. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers would ask about Buddy, and she would tell them everything, from the day he went missing to the day she found him at the shelter, and finally to the days she had spent cherishing him at home. She told them not just about finding a dog, but about finding hope, courage, and the meaning of love in everyday life. Through all of it, she discovered a truth she hadn't realized before. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from those we love the most, and sometimes the most unexpected events reveal the deepest truths about ourselves. Buddy had come back into her life to teach her that even in loss there is hope. Even in struggle there is meaning, and even when life seems unfair, love always finds a way. One rainy afternoon, as she sat at the shelter brushing a small terrier's fur, she looked out the window at the wet streets and thought about Buddy. She could still feel his warmth, hear the quiet rhythm of his breathing, and see the trust in his eyes. She smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you, Buddy, for everything." And in that moment, she understood fully that the love they had shared, the bond that had survived years of separation, the joy of reunion and the pain of parting, had changed her life forever. It had made her kinder, braver, and more open to the miracles hidden in ordinary days. Buddy had come back to her not just as a dog, but as a teacher, a reminder, and a guide. And through his story, she had learned a truth that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The love we give, the care we share, and the connections we honor never truly leave us. They remain quietly, shaping who we are and how we see the world. She finally felt at peace, knowing that although Buddy was no longer beside her in body, his spirit and the lessons he brought would remain with her forever. The days after Buddy's passing were quiet, but not empty. She had learned to live with the memory of him, carrying the warmth of his love wherever she went. The apartment no longer felt hollow, because even though he was gone, the lessons he had left behind filled the space. She found herself smiling at little things he would have enjoyed. The sunlight falling across the floor, the gentle sway of trees in the park, or the soft sound of rain tapping the window. Volunteering at the shelter had become more than just an activity. It was now a mission. Every dog she cared for reminded her of Buddy in some way, whether through a timid glance, a wagging tail, or a gentle nuzzle. She helped them eat, groomed their coats, walked them gently, and sometimes just sat quietly offering her presence. She had learned that love didn't always have to be dramatic. Sometimes it was as simple as sitting beside someone who needed comfort and being there, fully and sincerely. One day, a young woman came into the shelter, her eyes red from crying. She had been looking for a lost dog for days and was exhausted from worry. She described a small brown dog missing for weeks, and the volunteer team listened carefully. As the woman talked, she noticed the way the young woman's voice trembled, how she kept looking down at the floor in despair. She remembered herself, years ago, searching for Buddy. Her heart ached with empathy. She knelt beside the young woman and said softly, "We'll do everything we can to help you." She stayed by her side as the staff made calls, checked records, and searched the kennels. Every time she saw the woman's hope flicker, she remembered her own journey with Buddy, the fear, the patience, the miracle of finding him again. Hours later, the dog was found in the shelter, scared but safe. The young woman's relief was immediate, tears streaming down her face. She hugged her dog tightly, whispering over and over, "I'm never letting go again." Watching that reunion, she felt a quiet, profound peace. She realized that Buddy's story wasn't just about her. It was about hope, about love, about the miracles that can happen when we care enough to search, to wait, and to trust that some things are meant to be. She understood now that the love she had shared with Buddy had prepared her to help others experience the same joy. That evening, as she walked home from the shelter, she thought about how much her life had changed. Before Buddy, her days had felt empty, her heart heavy with longing for something she couldn't even name. After finding him, caring for him, and finally letting him go, she felt whole in a way she never had before. Life had taught her the value of patience, the strength in caring deeply, and the bittersweet beauty of loving fully, even when loss is inevitable. At home, she opened the photo album and placed a new picture beside the old one, a small snapshot of her volunteering at the shelter, with a dog in her arms and a soft smile on her face. She had learned that love could take many forms. It could be found in memories, in acts of kindness, in moments of quiet companionship, and in the courage to keep giving even when it hurts. She also began writing down her story, not for anyone else but for herself, as a way to remember everything she had learned. She wrote about the days she had spent searching for Buddy as a child, the unexpected miracle of finding him years later, the struggles of caring for him in his old age, and the lessons of patience, hope, and unconditional love he had left behind. Writing it helped her make sense of the emotions that had been swirling inside her since his passing. Months later, she received a letter from one of the families she had helped at the shelter. They thanked her for her care and kindness, sharing how much it had meant to them and their dog. Reading it, she felt warmth spread through her chest. She realized that Buddy's influence had extended far beyond their time together. Through her actions, his spirit continued to touch lives, bringing hope, comfort, and love to others who needed it. She thought about the first moment she had seen him at the shelter, older and worn, and how her heart had recognized him instantly. That moment had changed everything. It had reminded her that life often gives second chances, sometimes in ways we can't anticipate, and that we must be ready to recognize and embrace them when they arrive. The next weekend, she walked through the park near her apartment. Children were playing, couples strolled by, and dogs ran freely, tails wagging and tongues lolling. She paused near a bench, watching a golden retriever chase a ball across the grass. For a moment, she imagined it was Buddy, bounding toward her with excitement and love. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Even though Buddy was gone, he had left her with a gift that no one could take away, the understanding that love, when given freely and fully, can transform lives. His return had reminded her of the miracles that exist in everyday life, the kind that might go unnoticed unless we open our hearts and pay attention. That night, as she sat on her balcony looking at the city lights, she felt a calm she hadn't known in years. The world was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes painful, but it was also full of beauty, hope, and unexpected joy. She knew that she would continue to face challenges, losses, and uncertainty, but now she understood that these things were part of life's rhythm. They were reminders to treasure the moments we have, to care deeply, and to never give up on love. She whispered to the night, "Thank you, Buddy, for teaching me how to love, for teaching me how to live." And in her heart, she felt him there, not as a presence to hold, but as a quiet, enduring spirit guiding her, reminding her of the lessons they had shared and the love that never truly ends. From that day forward, she approached life differently. She volunteered more, cared more, and loved more freely. She understood that even small acts of kindness mattered, and that sometimes the smallest gestures could create the biggest differences in someone's life. Every dog she helped, every person she comforted, was a way of honoring Buddy's memory and the incredible bond they had shared. Her story, once full of longing and sorrow, had transformed into one of hope, courage, and gratitude. She knew that she would always miss Buddy, but she also knew that his influence would remain with her forever. In the smiles of the dogs she cared for, in the laughter of families reunited, and in the quiet moments of reflection, she felt his love continue to flow, gentle and unwavering. And as she closed her eyes that night, she realized something profound. The world is full of miracles. Some are grand and obvious, while others are quiet and hidden, waiting for someone to notice. Buddy had been her miracle. His return had shown her that hope can endure, love can survive, and second chances can come, even when they seem impossible. She understood now that life's greatest gifts are often found in the bonds we create, the compassion we share, and the courage we summon to open our hearts even after loss. Buddy had returned to teach her this lesson, and she would carry it with her always. The next morning she woke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The apartment felt warm and alive again. She walked to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and glanced at the photo of Buddy on the shelf. She smiled softly. It was a smile filled with love, gratitude, and understanding. Buddy had come back into her life, had shared his love, and had left her with a heart that was stronger, wiser, and more open to the miracles of the world. And though he was no longer there in body, she knew he would remain with her always, in every kind act, every gentle word, and every moment of love she gave. Her life, once quiet and empty, was now full of love, memories, hope, and the understanding that the bonds we hold dear can never truly be broken. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, she finally understood what it meant to love without limits, just as Buddy had taught her. Years passed, and life moved forward, carrying her through small joys and quiet challenges. She had continued volunteering at the shelter, now helping train new volunteers and organize adoption events. Dogs of all shapes and sizes crossed her path every day, each one with its own story, its own struggle, and its own chance at a new beginning. She often thought about Buddy, not with sadness but with gratitude. His return and the time they had shared had shaped her in ways she could never have imagined. She had become more patient, more compassionate, and more willing to take risks for the sake of love and connection. Sometimes, she would walk through the park where she had once taken Buddy for long, slow walks. She would pause under the same oak tree where he had rested beside her, watching children play, and in that quiet moment she would smile, feeling his presence in the wind, the rustle of leaves, and the warmth of sunlight on her face. One afternoon, a young girl approached her at the shelter, holding a small photo of a dog she had recently lost. She reminded her so much of herself when she had been searching for Buddy, desperate, hopeful, and full of love. She knelt beside the girl and held her hand, saying gently, "Don't give up hope. Sometimes miracles take time." As the girl's eyes brightened and she thanked her, she realized how Buddy's story continued to ripple outward. The lessons of love, patience, and resilience that he had taught her were now reaching others, inspiring small acts of kindness and hope. That night, she sat on her balcony with a notebook and pen, writing down her reflections. She wrote about Buddy, about the miracles hidden in everyday life, and about the courage it took to open your heart, even when loss was inevitable. She wrote not just for herself, but for anyone who might one day need to hear that hope can return, and love can endure. Looking back, she realized the most extraordinary part wasn't finding Buddy again. It was the way he had transformed her perspective on life. She understood now that even when people or animals leave us, their impact remains. Every memory, every lesson, every moment of connection continues to shape who we are. She closed her notebook and looked out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Life was full of uncertainty, but she felt ready for it. She had learned to cherish every fleeting moment, to trust in the kindness of fate, and to give her love fully, no matter the outcome. And deep in her heart, she knew that Buddy would always be with her, in her actions, in her compassion, and in the countless lives she would touch, just as he had touched hers. With a deep breath, she whispered softly into the night, "Thank you, Buddy, for everything. I'll carry you with me forever." And for the first time in a long time, she felt completely at peace, knowing that love, once given, never truly leaves.